Hello and welcome to the second session of the Community CAP programming series. Today we will be featuring a presentation on how to identify and tackle common internal and external barriers to launching or expanding a Community CAP program. This session will cover staff and municipal buy-in strategies, complaint mitigation, and de-escalation so that attendees will walk away with practical tools to advocate for and sustain a CCP in their communities. Before I hand it over to our presenters, a few things to note. For today, everyone will remain muted, but if you have a question, please feel free to put it in the Q&A box, which is at the bottom of your screen. And if John and Tyler have the opportunity to answer it, they will do so today. If not, we will save it for our panel session, which is next week on the 27th at the same time. And that session will feature all of the presenters from this Community CAP programming series. This session will be recorded and uploaded to the Best Friends Network Partner YouTube channel. And now I will pass it over to our presenter and my colleague, John Graves.
Hello, everyone. Sorry for the technical issues. You know, life is chaotic sometimes. I am John Graves. I am East Regional Strategist for Best Friends, focused on North Carolina and South Carolina. I do a lot of our nuisance mitigation training, and I do a little bit of our de-escalation training and all the fun things like that. And I am fortunate enough today to be joined by the Tyler Moore. It's funny I say that because we actually have two Tyler Moores in North Carolina. But anyway, the Tyler Moore of Onslow County Animal Services. And we're going to be going back and forth and chatting a little bit about you, about some of our typical CCP challenges. Okay, come on, technology. There we go. Hey, that's my dog. She's very cute. Her name is Fiona. And here is Tyler. When we talk about this, I've had this recently because I think it's really important to talk about kind of how we got here. We talk about this a lot when we're going through nuisance mitigation because a lot of the pushback is, they're an invasive species and all that. And I think it's important for us to understand how long cats have been domesticated. It's over 10,000 years now. Going back to the 1500s, we originally employed cats as mousers. That was the Cardinal Wolsey was one of the first ones there. And in 1598, we had our first cat show held in the UK, which included awards for Best Mouser and Best Ratter. For Europe, from Europe, we had cats aboard ships to the America, came along with Christopher Columbus and the Mayflower. And even back in like 1914, in early, 20th century, we had cats employed as mousers, and we had them actually working in the postal services. So another thing that we've kind of gotten to this point where trap and kill, when as we started implementing that, it's a long-serving model for managing cats, actually inflamed our population through unmanaged resources and litter rebounding. So here's the meat and potatoes of it, the fake meat and potatoes of it. Ordinance barriers are pretty common, so I kind of want to talk through that a little bit. My first recommendation is to review the ordinance and find the interpretation that may work for you, because it's always going to be people looking to interpret their own way as well. Looking at your nuisance ordinance and how, again, that might be able to be interpreted a little bit differently. If you've got a free roaming ordinance, that's not as big a barrier as a lot of people might think it is. And if it is a real barrier, the other opportunity is to get with your commissioners and actually suspend the ordinance until you have a time to really review and change the ordinance. And if your organization has your hands tied and is not able to do some of these services, maybe you're able to outsource some of the services while you implement the pieces of a CCP that you are able to implement. And I'm going to give you two quick examples. So this is an ordinance from shelter here or a community here in North Carolina. At large animals off premises and not under direct control. So it should be unlawful for an owner or any other person maintaining an animal in the county to permit or negligently allow an animal to be at large. An owner may lawfully permit an animal which is not dangerous or vicious to be at large in the course of a show, obedience school, tracking tests, field training, and other events sanctioned or supervised by a recognized organization. Hunting dogs may be at large in the course of hunting if under the control of the owner. However, this provision does not exempt an owner from otherwise complying with the provisions of this chapter. So an interpretation I would look at there is actually sanctioned by a recognized organization. Trap, neuter, vaccinate, return, CCPs are all recognized by national and local and regional organizations. So I would be looking at that as a potential way to interpret that TNVR and community cats can be allowed. And the other example I'm going to go give is domestic animals at large. It is unlawful for the owner of any domestic animal to allow such an animal to be at large in the town or on any town property except that dogs may be unleashed in approved designated areas inside town of blank. So CCP interpretation for that be, you know, what we've been doing is not working. So we're going to begin implementing nuisance mitigation practices to deter cats from the property where they are not allowed and improve attractiveness to host properties. Additionally, we'll be assisting with community spay neuter to reduce unwanted behaviors. And so what we're saying there is we are going to be pushing cats off of property they're not allowed to be on and pushing them back to where they are because that's a better and more recognized practice to actually mitigating these nuisance behaviors. And then we're talking about public perception a little bit, right? So nobody wants the cats there, right? That's the public perception. We know that's not actually true. We just know that the loudest voices often are the ones that don't want the cats there. So sometimes it's about mobilizing the locals to help show their support of TNVR and community cat programming. The public perception of everyone wants the cats dead. Not true at all. When you start having those conversations with people, that's actually the last thing people want. They just want their problems to stop. And that's what we talk a lot about nuisance mitigation and how to actually deter these behaviors. Again, only crazy cat people care about cats. We know that that's not actually true. We're going to talk a little bit about some of these numbers. I know they went through the first round as well, so you guys have a pretty good understanding of that. Supported by nearly all national animal welfare agencies. Another barrier, typical barrier, is access to spay neuter. So one thing I would consider is there a clinic within driving range. A lot of times volunteers will be willing to step up and help drive to a clinic that may be an hour away to help improve that access to spay neuter. Looking at supplies, making sure you're considering your human collateral, your financial collateral. There's always a lot of grants out there to at least get these programs started. If not, you can usually work with a local partner to help build some fundraising out for this if you're not able to do that directly yourself. Um, and so as far as supplies, consider traps, but also deterrents for nuisance mitigation. You can put those on a wish list. People will buy them pretty regularly. Um, Same with, other supplies. And again, considering your human collateral, what your volunteers are willing to do, what they can do, what they will do. And a lot of times it's more than you would think. So you just got to put the ask out. And most important thing I can do is say is like, start with what you can do. That's one of the things I love about nuisance mitigation is that you don't have to have great access to spay neuter. You don't have to have a ton of money. You just have to change your mindset and start doing things a little bit differently to better solve your community's issues and to start really addressing community cat programming. And most importantly, managing your time. Considering the amount of time you're spending driving out to picking up and caring for cats and bringing them back to the shelter, holding them for, 72 hours or longer. If you're able to do a lot more of that in the field, you're going to be managing your time a lot better. And I'm going to kick it over to Tyler, who's going to talk a little bit about her experience with the public perception and their barriers.
Yeah, so with us, we did start our community cap program in May of 2024. That was like the initial startup. However, it kind of started before that for us. We had to do a lot of educating, and it come down to educating those people that were consistently visiting us and contacting us, right? So we started previous to that kind of leewaying the public into knowing like this is what we're moving towards for all these people who were doing the trapping and bringing it to us and having to have those one-on-one conversations explaining the reasoning and the why really started to allow us in May to do the hard stop that what we call a hard stop of you have been caring for this feral cat. We are no longer assisting by taking them. We are now assisting with TNR and kind of pushing the people in the right direction. And once we actually kind of had those discussions with them, they actually were more in they wanted that more that wanted TNR more than they wanted to drop off and euthanize it because that's not the goal that they had. They just had the goal to stop the reproduction and overpopulation that they were feeding. So, I mean, in the reality of it, people did accept it a lot faster than what we thought that they would.
Yeah, and I say a lot of that comes to how much communication you're putting out there and how much you're engaging your public, which is again an important resource to manage and making sure you're keeping those things going. Right. And then so the other thing we talk about as, as we're addressing our municipal leaders and we're having these conversations is that we know that this is the public opinion and national and local support. So we see this in small communities, we see this in rural, we see this in, urban, we see this all over the place in Texas, in Georgia, and all these other places across the South. And pretty much every time we do this survey, it's usually around 70 to 75% of people either like having the cats there or they're indifferent to their presence. Again, it feels like it's the other way around because it's the louder voice often that is complaining. You're not going to call and talk about how much you love a cat. You're usually going to call when you're having an issue, typically, especially when you're reaching out to your local animal control. So we also know the public strongly opposes lethal roundups of community cats and more generally lethal methods as a shelter as means of population control. So when we're approaching our municipal leaders, there's basically a few different ways you want to approach them and different avenues you can take, kind of depending on what really drives that leader. Um, Trap and kill gives you no return on investment. That's one of the most important things. You're literally just spending money and getting nothing back out of it. The average cost to trap, neuter, vaccinate, or return a cat is $59. The average trap and kill is 110. So what that means is it's typically cheaper to actually go out, spay, neuter, and return the cat than it is to go out, drive out, pick it up, bring it back to the shelter, hold it for 3 days, and then euthanize it. And again, for that $59, you're putting back towards, you're investing in this, right? You're investing in this program. That 110 is just gone once it's gone. There's again a lot of grant opportunities out there for these things, especially for getting one started. And then it's kind of a harder sell if you're going to say like a community foundation, but if you can really correlate it to the public and the public health, they're a little bit more likely to actually support it. You can, again, like I said earlier, also partner with a local nonprofit and fundraise. A lot of times, these municipal leaders are going to be very responsive to money, right? And tax dollars, and the fact that this is not an efficient use of tax dollars. Trap and kill. Trap and vaccinated return, CCP in general, we know is a much more efficient model. And we can show that with data and with a lot of these different strategies. So levering local influencers can be a huge avenue to getting buy-in from your leaders. And sometimes I mean like a social media influencer, but really what I'm talking about is someone in your community that is influential to your municipal leaders. So maybe it's a larger business, maybe it's someone who's on the board, someone who's directly related to the board. Maybe it's a partner to one of the commissioners that is in your corner and kind of help drive those conversations. Another great tool. It's just doing a basic survey of your public to, take back to your commissioners, take back to your local leaders to show them that it is supported widely by your public. Another great consideration is your shelter staff mental health. A lot, especially municipal agencies, are leaning more and more towards being compassionate about the mental health on their staff. And I can tell you that euthanasia takes a toll. And again, there's a lot of great studies on that as well to take back. And rallying your constituents appropriately. So what we mean by that is going out to your local county commissioner meetings during a pitch or a presentation or while this is like having a conversation, and you can fill the room with supporters. It's a great thing to do, but one thing you don't want to do is have each supporter go up to the microphone and spend 3 minutes talking about how supportive they are, because that will exhaust your county commissioners pretty quickly. We normally recommend just having one or two spokespeople go up there, say their piece, and then ask everyone who's in the room who's in support to stand, because that's such a great visual, and it's a much better use of everyone's time. And then mitigating complaints. We're going to talk a little bit more about this later, but we're going to talk about deterrents and their uses and how to use a deterrent appropriately to actually solve the specific issue you're dealing with. Sterilization solves a ton of these nuisance behaviors as well. So we definitely want to make sure that we are prioritizing that as best we can. And we know, as we talked about a lot in the first session, that removing cats doesn't actually impact a population. It actually makes it worse. And then using stats, figures, and storytelling, like national statistics that show community support, community stats on repeat offenders can be really effective. So you can go to your shelter and be like, or you go to your municipal leaders and say, look, we pulled 10 cats from this one property every 3 months for the last 5 years. Obviously, what we're doing is not working. And then also national statistics on the reduction in call volume for nuisance complaints can go a long way, but also like consider storytelling and using regional examples. When I'm talking to my people here, and when I was originally pitching this, we would talk about these different um, areas. There was a restaurant and a grocery store that had massive community cat populations for years, and our local partners were able to go in and actually resolve these populations and get them down after years of us trapping, removing, and killing. And being able to talk about like, oh yeah, I guess I haven't seen any cats at this restaurant anymore can really help with your locals. Storytelling can go a long way depending on the person you're talking to. And so, I'm sorry, Tyler. I think you were gonna talk there, Bill. Your experience here with that too.
Yeah, so in reality, like all of this is comes down into play no matter what portion you are doing. So obviously the financials and all of these pieces. We found what was really effective for us though is that, the squeaky wheel gets the grease type concept. Because our commissioners, they like to take the phone calls from the people who have the complaints. And so we were finding out that the biggest piece that our commissioners were having issues were with the complaints that they were getting about the cats, about the nuisance, that we're not doing anything. So whenever we like employed this or talked to them about the community cat program, every time they called us with a complaint, we would, educate them on like why we wanted to do this. And it seemed to start like changing those tunes. And we have a local group that we work with that does the TNR, and they would go trap, neuter, and return all these cats in this location, and then they never heard from that person again. And it seemed to start like reducing the amount of complaints that we had. And so the buy-in really started when the complaints started to disintegrate, basically. And now we're getting like one or two complaints a year to our commissioners who, are really causing problems. Not really problems, but just having to be handled in the reality of it. And so it comes down to figuring out what is the integral piece in your commissioners that will really change them from, feeling that this might not work to it does work. And so just finding that piece for them is really the biggest portion that you have to figure out.
We're also big fans and best friends of pilot programs, so piloting something like this. And that's basically what we did actually in Onslow is we started it with this external partner with Onslow Animal Services Engagement and their piece of it. And then we've grown it out to be a pretty big and pretty successful program that they're now looking at funding. The county is actually looking at funding. So it's been really amazing to watch this growth. And I just talked about this recently in another webinar about the fact that this started from like a $2,500 grant that we did in Onslow with a really small upstart and how it's grown over the last 3 years. So don't be afraid to start small and, and just build on it and be able to show your community and show your leaders how it works.
Yeah, I would even
Uh,
tap
Go
onto
ahead.
that, saying that, we created a wait list for these people, and it is so big that our admin now are looking at that like, how can we fix this? And we're now trying to look at creating a clinic internally for the county to, actually go towards only TNR. That's the only piece that this clinic is gonna touch for a while. And so it's kind of amazing to see the difference from 3 years ago to what it is now.
And then so those commissioners and those leaders that are caring more about data and seeing, this working in other areas, here's some studies you can share with them. One of my favorites is this Wichita Falls, Texas community, where cat-related complaint calls actually fell more than 90%. In just a period of a couple of years through implementation of an intensive TNR program and aggressive, for lack of a better term, feral nuisance mitigation practices. So yeah, anyway, so there's some really great studies out there. I definitely recommend, using these in your conversations. And also we talked about national organizations in support of TNVR, and of course we've got Best Friends, and you've got Humane World for Animals, and of course Alley Cat Allies. But also the National Animal Control Association has been out and publicly in favor of trap, neuter, vaccinate, return, and community cat programming since 2018. And the American Bar Association, which will help with your county attorneys, actually are supportive of it for a lot of different reasons, but also because cats are considered and can be considered personal property. And it's also easy, as we know, for owned and neighbor cats to get caught up in the cycle of trap and kill, which is not what anyone wants. So Tyler, you can talk about this a little bit.
Yeah, so, in reality, what it looks like whenever you're employing this in your community, it's really community. That's basically the integral piece to this is that you have to engage your community into helping you ensure that this program is moving forward, right? So that looks like educating the public when they come in, especially these people who are what we know to be the feeders, right? Like as a historical, like in historical, you see these people come regularly to your shelter. You know who these people are. And so helping them while then they tell their friends who are doing things. And it just becomes this huge piece. And one thing that has really been integral into our program is that we actually work really closely with a local organization called Paws for Purpose. They're really what has kind of driven the TNVR program for us. They do all of our TNR, they do the transports and things like that, but they're also the people and the feet on the ground. They're part of the community. And we actually found, and while we were doing this, we noticed that they don't really want to talk to the local animal control, right? They don't trust us as much, but they trust our partner, who the people who come in there and talk to them like, hey, I'm just happy to help you get this fixed. Get or fix your problem. Can you let me, TNR your cats and we'll see what happens. And so we've actually built this really great relationship with them. And part of that relationship is they do our TNR and we help them with the kittens that or the medical cases and things that are needing us, right, from the community to actually, better the program that we have. And so it's turned into where we've seen the community shift from not being so or being more hesitant to work with us and us as animal services and us as in Paws for Purpose to now being, more compliant and happy to work with us and happy to like we see it on social media a lot. Take the animal to animal services, they'll help them, and so that's kind of nice to see that shift versus they'll kill them to they'll help them. But it still comes down to education of those pieces too, right? So like I don't want the kitten that is a bottle baby, but I'll be happy to help you get that kitten to where it needs to be. And so it's kind of started to transition from that kill concept in the public perception to we are now here to help them. And it's been really wonderful to see that.
Yeah, like the time it takes to rebuild trust if you're coming from an animal control perspective, and if you're looking at the history of your if your shelter has a long history of trap and kill, it's going to take a while to regain the trust from these people. And so giving that time and showing it through your efforts, as Onslow has done, is really important. And that's something we struggled with a lot too. But anyway, so we talked about this a lot, but again, going back to these municipal leaders and things that help sell them is, 85% of Americans believe it's important to have no-kill shelters in their area. 59% that would sign a petition to require no-kill animal shelters in their area, and 57% are actually willing to donate to make it happen. All right, so we're going to move on a little bit here, talking about managing mindsets. This is such a challenging part of a community cat program. And a lot of it is when we're in animal control, we have to stop and change our own mindset. We have to recognize that trap and kill doesn't work. We need to be more proactive and less reactive. I was in animal services for 8 years before coming, to Best Friends, and we started implementing our community cat program. And it was scary and it was hard. One of the hardest parts, especially if you've been a certified euthanasia technician and you've euthanized a lot of feral cats, is like stopping and recognizing that what you're doing isn't working and it isn't the best practice. And what you did in the past really, unfortunately, wasn't having any kind of a positive influence. bring the community along to what we know works. Know that removing the cat makes one citizen happy while harming the relationship animal services has with the rest of your citizens. We also need to stop lying to the public and ourselves. For a long time, as animal control, we would, someone would, a little old lady would trap a cat, and she'd be so worried, and she'd be like, "What's going to happen to the cat?" And we'd be like, "Oh, we're going to take it back to the shelter, let it decompress, give it a spa day, see how it goes." Meanwhile, this cat is like thrashing in the cage, and we know that 99% of the time that cat is going to be euthanized. So just having that conversation and being really direct, like, hey, if I take this cat back, it's probably going to get sick. It's probably going to have to get put down. There's not a lot of output for it unless we can, get it fixed and bring it back to you. And if we fix it and bring it back to you, we also know that it's going to start working towards really maintaining your population. And yeah, and a lot of times if you tell them that you're going to have to kill this animal, that's not what they want. They don't want to be a part of that. They want to be part of the solution. And really providing these talking points and these solutions back to them and giving them another opportunity goes a really long way. We also have to recognize that cats are safer outside. I mean, as we know, like a stray cat comes into a shelter, it still has like a 2 to 3% chance of actually making it back home if it comes in stray. And if it's out in the wild, it's like 70 to 80%. So getting back home to themselves is something they're pretty good at. And then the complainant's mindset, right? So these people have a right to be upset. Their frustration's at a tipping point. They may have already tried other methods, especially in the age of the internet where everyone can go on and see, and they try putting mothballs out in their yard or whatever they've tried that may or may not have worked. And so they're experiencing these really frustrating behaviors, like cats are spraying on their porch, they're peeing in their garden, they're scratching their cars. These are all things that are frustrating and are impacting their quality of life. We have to be empathetic to that. We have to often make demands based on they make demands, excuse me, based on their experience or what they feel needs to be done. Like they're going to tell you just take the cat away, and we're like, look, if I do that, like one and a half more cats is going to move in. We don't want that, and here's why, and here's what we can do instead. They might make threats against the animal. For the most part, people that are calling you are not actually going to move forward with those threats. It's the ones that don't call you. They're just trying to get movement out of you. And they also make threats against you in the manner of contacting your supervisor. This is why we try to make sure everyone, all the way up to your county manager and your county commissioners, are informed as to what and why you're doing these things. So that, if someone says, I'm going to call your supervisor, it's like, well, here's his number. His name is Richard. He's not going to help you, but let's try anyway. Richard is Tyler's boss. Caregiver's mindset. So frustration is at a tipping point for them as well, right? Because they've been working in the dark, often against significant barriers. They're just trying to help these cats. And they don't understand, why people are so frustrated. They often start in a reaction to seeing cats, but may not realize or have researched the best practices on implementation. Usually it's just a reactive thing. They see this cat and they're like, oh, I need to feed it. They don't recognize that there are appropriate levels and ways to feed and care for these animals. They often, as Tyler was saying, have a distrust of animal control, given the history or perception of animal control, even if it's not, even if you have an organization that's been running a proactive and life-saving program for a while, there's still a lot of perception of animal control in the media. They're most responsive in my experience to material from like-minded sources. So if you hand them something that says Onslow County Animal Services and they don't trust you, they're not going to trust what's in that resource. So my officers, we always carried the Alley Cat Allies colony care guide because it was a quick 1 page, talks about like picking food up after an hour, half an hour, whichever one, depending on how often you're feeding, how much to feed per cat, like not to leave your trash, all of these things that we know are best practices. But hearing that from a like-minded resource, like so Best Friends or Alley Cat or Humane World, goes a lot further than hearing it something that comes from the actual county, right? So, yeah. Um, Finding common grounds, right? This is one of the most important things you can do. We need to listen to all sides. We need to share true public opinion with both sides. And remember, most importantly, when we're talking about community cats, fewer cats is everyone's goal. So whether you like cats, whether you hate cats, really even if you're indifferent to cats, you still want fewer cats out there. And whenever possible, getting complainants and caregivers working together removes anonymity and humanizes one another. That really goes a long way. Um, Obviously depends on the complainant, it depends on the caregiver, how much they're willing to actually work together. But sometimes in these cases, we're like, well, I don't want my neighbor to be mad at me, but I just don't want to be dealing with this anymore. And being able to bring them together can really move things along quickly. We already talked about meeting caregivers with their own resources and engaging conversation. There's a QR code here linked to our caretaker requirements, very similar. It's a nice one pager that we have now too as well. And give your caregivers like give them time. Again, let your actions speak to show them that you are engaging and helping both sides now. And with complainants, discuss the importance of managing resources. Oh, I'm sorry. That actually should be under caregivers. I missed that. With caregivers, like, discussing the importance of managing resources, again, like especially food. We've all seen that caregiver who's ripped open a 16-pound bag of cat food and dumped it on the ground and walked away and then come back the next day and did the same thing. And so having conversations and sharing these resources that show them that what they're actually doing is increasing the resource, which increases the population, and also increases their damage to their wallet. So resources and money that can be spent elsewhere can go a really long way. As far as complainants go, let them vent, get them physically moving. Getting people physically moving is one of the best ways to calm them down. Ask them to show you where the issue they're having is occurring, where the cat's coming from, and what the specific issue is. So not only is this calming them down, it's showing them how engaged you are in actually finding a solution. And again, use data, local successes, and storytelling to show this is a common problem with common solutions. Studies show removal does not work, and this will actually provide long-term solutions for all cats. That's what I used to tell people all the time. Like, I'm not just going to solve for the cat that's here today. I'm going to solve for the cat that would show up tomorrow, and the one that would show up the day after that, and all of these things. We talk a lot about managing nuisance behaviors, right? One of the most important things is determining the real issue. How is the cat accessing the property? And like what kind of damage is the cat causing? This is why I love site evaluations to actually go out and again see these things in person. What is attracting the cat to the property? Is the caregiver known, or is there a host property known? Does the host property need to be modified or moved? And is the feeding area at the host property clean and tidy? And when I say host property, I mean where these guys are being fed and typically, where their housing and things like that are as well. And then determining the solution. Can the access to this property be eliminated or modified? Can the attractant be eliminated or modified? Can a caregiver be engaged with the solution? Is the host property in line with best practices? Is it a small area, a large area? And the most important piece is matching the deterrent and its use to the damage and the solution. And we'll talk about that again in another slide. About these deterrents and how the best way to use them is, and some common I don't want to say mistakes, but there's just better ways to actually use the tools. And also that sterilization resolves so many of these issues. The yowling, the fighting, the spraying, all of these things can actually be greatly reduced, if not eliminated, by sterilization. And then determine the caregiver, looking for visible signs of feeding, asking the neighbors, asking the complainant. A lot of times they will know who the person is that's feeding, or they'll see them. And when they come through and be able to give you at least some good leads, a little detective work there. Approach them with positivity and again, meeting the caretaker with their own resources. I know I've said that 3 times, but it is just so beneficial. Discuss the importance of working with the complainant for the safety of the cat, and ask about their management techniques. How often are they feeding? How much? Are they providing spay neuter? And looking for opportunities to provide resources and help them. That's one of the most important things, to show your engagement here, and making host sites more attractive. We talk about using like cat grass, making sure all of the host sites have everything that a cat is looking for. So does it have food, water, shelter? Does it have access off the ground and a lower access? That's also really important because different types of cats like these different and feel safer in these different types of environments. So these are some of the common nuisance mitigation tools that we see. Tyler, I'll let you talk about some of the ways you've used them, and I can talk about some of what I've got too.
Yeah, so basically like we were just discussing that it comes down to determining what the true problem is. So, for example, I've had complaints where we have people who grow a garden, right? And they don't want the cats pooping in their garden. So, like, how do we fix that? We use something that they don't tactilely like, or we can use motions activated sprinklers to keep them away from it. So I mean, it comes down to truly looking at what the complaint is and trying to get down to the nitty-gritty of it to be able to determine which one is going to be the best. Personally, I find that the community that we've talked to like the, motion activated stuff, but a lot of times they don't want to purchase it. We are looking into a type of rental program, but they don't mind purchasing like the cheap stuff. So we see the spikes that are like on top of the fencing or where the rolly chair is. I usually tell people like go get some of that the mats for the rolly chair, put it down and give them about 30 days and then see if it changes the pattern of behavior. And when I have those discussions with people, they like to hear that there's kind of an end date that's there of what this might, this deterrent's going to work for. And it kind of, allows them to have that buy-in to do the deterrent that we've suggested for them.
Yeah, so piling on that, like, basically what you're talking about is like Tyler said, is you're trying to disrupt the pattern for a period of 30 days. Cats are, driven by their own pattern. And so, like you'll see a cat will have breakfast at one house and then it'll go next door to another house, and it'll go up on the porch and have a nice nap on the patio furniture. And in the afternoon, it goes three houses down and has its afternoon snack, right? So if the person who owns that property with the couch and the patio doesn't want them there, you have to disrupt that pattern. The scat mats, which are in the upper corner here, the black rolled mats, they make them in flat and rolled now. You can get them for really, really cheap on like Amazon and Temu and all these different places, really. They were originally designed to go under gardens, and they work great for that. But the only issue that is like once they're there, they're there. But they also work really well in that situation where you have like lawn furniture that is attracting the cats up for a nap. You can actually lay it out on the lawn furniture. Again, it's tactile. They don't really like it. And so the cats won't lay there. It's lightweight. It can be moved if you want to have a nice afternoon nap on the porch yourself. And it just has a lot of uses similar to that. Of course, we've got our ultrasonic pest deterrent down in the corner. I love these. Placement is the most important thing. So we talk a lot about like cats getting on cars, right, and scratching up the paint. That's a really common complaint. So what a lot of people do is they'll put one of these motion sensors, and what it does is it emits a loud noise if you're not familiar. So when the cat walks by, so what ends up happening is they'll put it right by their car. The cat will walk up to the sensor will go off, and then the cat will jump on top of the car. So we're actually encouraging them to do exactly what we don't want them to. So in that situation, we always recommend putting it up high. So if the cat jumps onto the car, it's, emits the noise to scare them back off. The motion detector sprinklers are great in like larger situations. If you've got a large area where they're accessing the property, we really recommend using those. They're also great again for gardens and for cars and for porches. And some of this stuff is trial and error, right? So you're going to start with one thing, see if it works. And if it doesn't, you're going to move on to something else. I love the Critter Ritter. The only issue with that is if you're not familiar, it's a powder. It goes on the ground and it's a deterrent, like a scent deterrent, essentially. I really like it for under porches and under like houses, under trailers, things like that, because it will wash away really quickly if it's open to the rain. So kind of depends on how rainy your season is, but if you've got it where it's covered, or if you've got cats that are getting under your porch and using it as a litter box, you can put it underneath there and it can really go a long way. So that's just some of the deterrents. There's tons of information out there on these, and we've got tons of information on our network site about deterrents and their uses and videos. We're going to have my email at the end. You're always welcome to reach out to me. We can go a little more in depth to that. But again, placement is one of the most important things I could say. Um, what we talk about here is I just like to kind of remind people that when you're building this program out, is making sure you have a holistic community cat program consideration. So you've got TNVR and you've got nuisance mitigation, but you also are planning out your community engagement. Like Tyler and them, they've done some kind of town halls and some open conversations with their community. And again, going back to managing your resources, managing your human collateral, managing your access to spay neuter, managing all of these things to keep things rolling and making sure you're touching all pieces, right? Especially nuisance mitigation is one of the most important when you're talking to municipal leaders, because like Tyler said earlier, they do not want to get the phone call. That's the number one thing they do not want. We've got a 90-day implementation plan here. And then we've got kind of a good reference here, right, for implementation of a 90-day plan. Um, and then we've got some other additional resources here. I feel like I missed a slide actually. I'm gonna double back here real fast. Ah, yeah, I feel like we skipped right over de-escalation tips, right? How did this happen? I think it was Tyler's fault. So I'm going to talk about this real quick. I do apologize. I'm going to back this up a little bit. Um, Practicing good de-escalation when you're talking about managing nuisance behaviors and engaging your public is huge. There's a lot of different tools and things online that you can use for practicing active listening. You can, but one of the things I always tell people is repeat back what the party is saying to you, especially when you're like in a kind of a heated conversation. And make sure that you're getting everyone on the same page. So if someone says something back to you, says something to you, you want to repeat it back until everything is clear and you're all on the same page. It doesn't mean you need to agree. It just means to, I'm hearing you're saying this. Is that correct? Right? Reiterate your understanding this is a frustrating situation and you're here to help them resolve it. And don't try to argue against their experience. Just confirm, okay, cat scratching up your car. Don't be like, well, like the cat scratches my car and I don't care. Just let it, understand that that's an issue for them. Confirm it and move on. And then waiting until the person is finished before you respond. It's really hard to do that sometimes because all of our brains move so quickly and we're always looking to make sure that everything is going. A lot of times when I'm having these conversations with people and I'm in the field, I'll tell them, hey, I'm not ignoring you, I'm making notes. So I have my phone out, or I'm not texting you, I'm making some notes about our conversation. And so if they say something, I'll quickly write down something I want to make sure I come back to and then continue listening on, right? If you're not familiar with mirroring, it is actually more of like a customer service technique. In body language, it works really, really well. So basically, when someone comes at you and they're super stiff and they're super hard, you're going to kind of meet their position, but slightly softer. And then what happens is naturally they get softer, and then you get a little softer, and then you get a little softer to the point where everyone's just a lot more relaxed and able to really take in the information that's coming there. And also, so you don't want to stand like rigidly in front of them. You want to kind of stand to the side, and again, keeping yourself slightly more relaxed. We talked about earlier about getting them up and move them around. It goes a really long way. I cannot reiterate that enough. Relax and breathe and use slow, like deliberate speech and movements, not like I'm doing in this rush presentation. But you always want to kind of slow down and make sure you're thinking about what you're saying and you're really listening to what they're saying. Subtle soothe techniques are like, they kind of go back to those fidget spinners, right? Like people had those. There's just different things that you can do that will help kind of you stay calm. Some people will do like like a stone in their hand. If you're having something physical in your hand, I would recommend calling attention to it again so that you are letting them know this is a method that you're employing to make sure you're listening attentively. And so they don't think that you're just fidgeting to get away from them. And I'm maintaining appropriate personal space. There's a lot of stuff out there about like what is personal space between a friend, a colleague, and a stranger. And so you're going to want to make sure you're maintaining that appropriate space. Other tips, find the right person for practicing site evaluations and de-escalation. Like some people are better at getting yelled at than others, to be honest with you. It's what I miss the most. Actually, I love getting yelled at. I love de-escalation. It's like my favorite. Some people are not quite as good at it. And some people are going to be a little more reactive, and putting them in the right situation is going to be, beneficial to your organization and making sure the right people are doing the right things, right? Remove yourself politely if you feel the situation is spiraling before it crashes, and just be like, hey, you know what? I'm not sure we're really getting anywhere right now. Let me go do a little bit of research and I'm going to come back and talk to you, right? Um, Practice using and over but and follow it up with like, serve purposes of words that serve purpose. There you go. So what I mean by that is, so rather than saying, but I'm not going to be able to help you today, you're going to go with, and I'm sorry, I'm not able to help you with this part, but I'll do this instead. Sorry, I'm putting a but in there. But practicing the and is stronger and moving things forward than a but, right? Um, and humanize yourself, introduce yourself, personalize the conversation a bit, if you can, like, hey, I was dealing with this issue before too, and I did this, or I've seen this and this, so I totally get it. Like, I would hate for my cars to be getting scratched up as well. And showing empathy, saying, I understand that this is frustrating, and I'm here to help you today. There's a good use of the and, right? Um, as far as the and goes, you're also going to be like, and I'm going to do this specific action for you today. Like, I know you're experiencing this, and we're going to get you a motion detector sprinkler that's going to help deter the cats from your property, right? So, okay, here we go again. We're back to the first 90-day plans. This is some reference materials for you guys, some things that has been helpful to other shelters in the past that are starting to do this. Identifying the cornerstones again of a program, identifying, determining the partners, identifying resources, whether they're nearby or a little further, and how you're going to access those resources, and developing these processes. And of course, having a media rollout is huge. It's really beneficial. And tracking and monitoring, evaluating the work is so important to getting funding in the future. This is some additional resources we have, again, for providing printed material with info and TNVR. Refer calls to a CCP staff or local TNR group. If you have a larger animal control team, I would say of like 4 or 5 or more, one thing we recommend is putting one person, like one lead at your ACO team on community cats, so they get to know these like information and these things backwards and forwards, and they get really comfortable having these conversations. One of the benefits of community cat problems is that they're not usually immediate. They're something that can kind of go on your back burner for a day or two. As far as response goes, it's usually something that's been happening for a long time. And so you're able to kind of wait and put the right person. And if you tell them too, like, hey, we're going to have our specialist come out on Tuesday, do a site evaluation and talk to you about this. People are going to care more about getting a specialist than getting someone out there who doesn't know what they're talking about. Identifying caregivers in the area who can help reduce these problems. I know like a lot of shelters have done a deterrent loan out program when they've stopped using a trap loan out program. So that can go really, really well. Definitely something we recommend. And again, if you can't do these practices or you don't have the bandwidth for it or you're not allowed or whatever it is, consider partnering with like a local TNR or a local group. Humane Society of Charlotte and CHARMEC years ago actually started referring all of their calls back to Humane Society of Charlotte, and they would refer back to officers whenever it was necessary. And then they eventually transferred the program back all the way to CHARMEC. So, it's another great reference for you. We've added this kind of recently to some of our nuisance mitigation because engagement and interaction with wildlife is something that's very important to all of us. So installing some of these features and practicing some of these things for your feeding stations, especially, can go a long way with minimizing these conflicts with wildlife. And so installing secure feeding stations, like higher off the ground, dual exits, smooth posts, skirted flashing, blah, 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 blah. Bird feeders, bathers, all these other attractants 10 to 12 feet away from potential cat hiding places. Eliminate unintentional food sources, and replacing bird feeders with native plants is actually just kind of a general wildlife recommendation these days. And one of these, keeping areas mowed, clean, and well maintained is one of the best because cats have fewer places to hide and hunt, right? And when found, protect these, nesting animals as best you can. So that's me, Melissa Jones. Tyler, is there anything I missed?
I wouldn't say so. I don't think so. I think mostly the biggest pieces are going to be coming down to taking the information that you have and just seeing what works for your organization and start there. Because then the other pieces will fall into place that you need. It's just going to be start at that small point that you know you can do, and then start growing to the next section. And it truly becomes much bigger than you would have thought it would have. There is like light at the end of the tunnel, and it's hard to get there sometimes, but it does come. It just takes time.
That's good advice. All right, well, thank you both of you, John and Tyler. That was some great information. Next up, we'll be sending out an email after this session, and it will include a link to a Trello board with a ton of CCP resources, including a lot of what John and Tyler have talked about in their session. It will also contain a link to a recording of the session and some information about our CAT Lifesaving Fundamentals course. At the end of this 3-part series, there will be an opportunity to apply for funding for your CCP, as well as a scholarship to that CAT Lifesaving Fundamentals course, which is in partnership with Southern Utah University. Next week, so the 27th, same time, will be our 3rd and final session of the Lifesaving Lab series on community CAT programming, and it will feature a panel of speakers from the first 2 sessions. So from last week's session with Leah Long and Peyton Corley, and then as well as this week's session with John and Tyler. And they will answer your questions along with provide information to help you solidify sustainable practices by addressing barriers and building on lessons from earlier sessions. So we hope that you will join us, and we will see you there. Thank you very much.
Thank you.